Right, so now what we want to do is create this individual destinations page. So what we essentially want to do here is create that, but it needs to be dynamic. So these values over here are going to be the params ID that we need to get, and then use that ID to be able to fetch the relevant information from the relevant API as we displayed earlier over here. So if we go to /1, for example, and /API, this will basically set the API as the first API that we want. So the first part is let's create the page, and then the second part is we need to create the API as well. So let's do that. And then finally, what we want to do is we want to be able to fetch all of this data instead of client side on the server. So we'll show you how that works. So let me just go into my code where we have the app router over here. We have our components. Let's close them down. We have our destinations, which is where we want the ID to appear. So all you do now is we create another route after destination. So within the destinations folder, so in here now, create a new file. Within the folder, we need to do ID, or this can be slug or whatever you want to do, slash, and then page.tsx in here again. So now all you want to do now is simulate what we have here. So let me just copy this and paste this in, and what you can call this whatever you want, but in this scenario here, I'm just going to call this individual destination or destination information page, or whatever you want to call it. Let's just call it individual destination, like so, because this is a single destination that we have. And let me just render out the ID, so individual destination, like so. And let's do a p tag for the ID is, and then we need to get the ID from somewhere, and we generally get that from the params object. So let me just save this for now, and I want to first of all check that this page is working correctly, and it should do. So let me just refresh. So now you can see it's working correctly. So let me just go in a destination, New York, for example. You can see all the information is working. But if I did /200, you can see it's still working. So what we want to do is we want to stop the number of the slash based on the ID if it is valid. So let's do that via the params. Again, we need to access the params. So what you would do normally in this scenario here, again, if you remember, this page is server side, so we can get access to the params. What we want to do now is destructure the params in here, and let's just actually console log the params object like that. And then I also want to go into page over here, or the relevant component where I logged out all the destinations. So simply just do console.log, and I want to delete this one in the use effect. So now let me save this, and now what will happen is we will get an error. So let me just refresh, and now you can see here, let me just zoom in and expand this. You can see here it says server promise, and then it's pending params. So essentially the params are now pending because this is a promise, and now we need to resolve or reject it. But again, when something is pending, we need to know that this is async, so therefore we need to await it. So let's go ahead and await the params itself. So in this page, this is the destinations page, and we need to find the relevant page, which is in here. And I'm just going to close all the other tabs. So we've got params in here. If we hover over it, it's saying params is of any type, so we need to specify the type as well. Let's go ahead and do that. So let's just create an interface in here of individual destination props, like so. And then params is generally ID of string like that. But because params is an object, what we want to do is destructure it, and it's also a promise, so we want to await it. So let's do const ID of params, like so. Again, we need to add in the type in here of individual destination props, and let's actually console log the ID as well. And ID is of curly brace ID, like that. So now let's save this. And again, we remember that this was a promise, and you can see in here what it's saying is basically saying it's saying an error in here. So it says route/destination/ID use params.id. Params should be awaited before using its properties. Learn more about it in here, this URL in here. We can kind of fix this already. So the way it works is we just need to add await in here. But again, if you hover over await, it says await expressions are only allowed with async functions and at the end of top levels and at the top levels of modules. So now you can see, let me just delete this, and you can see this error has happened in here. So what we would do is the block that the ID is in is obviously in the page function over here. Now, because everything is server side, we can essentially do something quite simple, which is we can just add async in here like that. So now we've turned this individual destination page component into an async function now. So all we can do now is console log the ID like so. Let me just delete this because we're logging it out in the browser itself. So now let me save, and actually let's check the terminal in here. You can see there's no errors now. So let's go ahead in the browser, and now you can see it says ID is 200. Let me just actually, we don't need the dollar sign, and save that. And now if we change this to, for example, go into destinations, and we can go and type in view details 1, for example. Let's go into here, ID is 2, destinations, and go to Dubai. And again, click through to here, ID is 9. So that's all working correctly, but we're getting a 500 error. What's the error in here? Timeout error. So let me just close this, clear everything out, and do npm run dev once more. So now that is how you would get access to the params of obviously what we have. What we want to do next is create the page, and the params are working fine. Now what we want to do next is create the API for this ID. So what we will do is we will do that part next.